and welcome to episode 47 of the Fit Across Cultures podcast. My name is Susan Salzbrenner. I'm obviously the host of the show. I'm also the founder of Fit Across Cultures, where we help athletes and coaches succeed and navigate across cultures. And it is an absolute pleasure to have a hockey coach as a guest today, Barry Smith. I'm super excited to have you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Susan. It's great to be here.
And so the reason I say I'm so excited to have a hockey coach is because the last episode 46, I had Ryan Minkoff, who's actually an ice hockey player on the show, and he was talking about his experience in playing abroad in Finland. So I think this will be the hockey month.
Yes,
so
sure.
It's really nice to have both perspectives. But why don't we start at the top of really like you telling us what got you into hockey? You obviously played for the University of Michigan, Alaska, right?
Yes.
And then moved into coaching. So if you could just give us a very brief overview of how that happened, that would be great.
Well, you know what? I became a big fan when I was a kid. Our family moved to St. Louis. It was the year the St. Louis Blues first came into the NHL. Became a fan from there. After that, I was just hooked on it. It was just a sport, my father introduced me to, and I really loved. I played at the university level. Then I played 10 years of pro. I played both in North America and Europe. So I have a little bit of the European playing experience as well from years and years ago, which has changed quite drastically.
Sure.
And then really, I got into coaching as I wanted to stay in the game. I loved the game. And in my last few years of playing in Europe, I was a player coach. So I kind of had a little taste of that.
Yeah.
And it kind of really kind of put the hook in there for me. And then I started out, I came back home, and I actually started as an assistant coach where I began my pro career in the minor leagues, and then worked through the levels, and moved up. And eventually, you change job to better yourself, or people decide that it's time for you to change.
Right.
As it is in our business with coaching. And, and then the progression just went on to have the opportunity to coach in Europe as well.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the short of 21-year career, 23-year career as a coach.
Wow. It's tough to do that in five sentences, right?
Yeah, to keep it within the time limit. Yeah, so it was just a real good progression for me. Like I said, I've always loved the sport. Yeah. And, coaching was the next step for me. I love the teaching aspect. I love the competitive aspect of it. For me, I love being around athletes. It's an outstanding job for myself. It's not really considered a job, because
that's the greatest, right?
Yeah.
I think what's interesting, though, is that, as a player playing on a professional level, there's already limited available spots, right? So you're fighting, it's competitive. But as a coach, you're almost taking to the next level. There's even less positions for coaches at a professional level. So how did you perceive that in terms of finding contracts as a player, and then in the difference of as a coach? What was the main difference for you there?
Well, as a player, it's a little more different because people go on your style of play, and obviously people have seen you play and what they're looking for. Back in the time when I played back in the 80s when I went to Europe, it was a real connection of a friend, and then, got a tryout and they liked the way I played, and so it progressed from there. Coaching is much the same. A lot of times we say in our business, it's not what you know, but it's who you know.
Yeah.
A lot of times, my first job, I was hired by a general manager who I played for. He was the coach, and I played for him in my first year pro, and we talked, and obviously we felt that it was a good connection, so it started from there. And so that's what a lot of things are, a little bit of people who you meet in the industry and that. Though I have gotten jobs where there was completely no connection, just an opportunity where I sent a resume in on a job opening. They liked what they saw in the resume. Again, we went from usually it's a phone interview to an in-person interview, and then if you feel that connection, you get the job. But a lot of them, it's usually a lot of times where you connect up with someone you know, or someone you know knows someone,
Yeah.
and it gets you your foot in the door, and then obviously you're on your own from there. But usually that's how coaching works. There's a connection somewhere along the line through a friend or through a personal commitment of someone you played with or worked with before previously.
Yeah. And is there any advice you have for younger coaches that might not have had the player experience, but that want to coach at an international level and might not have the network that, someone that has a player career had? Do you have any advice for those people to step out and, create an international network? I'm guessing it's through people that know people, kind of getting the word out.
Yeah, now, with social media and the internet and everything, there's so many ways you can get yourself out there. Obviously, LinkedIn is one, a great one through that, to put out there that, yes, I'm looking for something. Here's my background, to get those international connections, get on websites and send to places that maybe, there's a Euro hockey sites, there's, elite prospect sites. There's lots of different sites that are looking for people, and just get your resume out there. I think as a young coach, you have to be willing to really not look at it from a monetary standpoint early on. If you want to get your foot in the door, if you're willing to say, okay, I'll come over, if you give me a place to stay, I can work part-time, I can, I'm willing to do whatever it does to make it happen, to get my foot in the door, get that experience, and, get some exposure to start my foot off over in Europe. So really, you have to be willing to go out and maybe take a step back financially and just get in there and get your foot in the door, and then build from there.
So it's really about building a reputation while kind of bootstrapping and just biting the bullet of, sharing a room or working somewhere part-time as an English teacher, or, just being creative but that, I think, also divides the people that sort of want it from those that are 100% motivated to be a coach, right?
You know what? That's exactly it. You have to want to do it. And if you do want to do it, you'll find a way. You'll be creative to make it happen. You'll find a way to, make it happen monetarily, housing, all those things. If you really do want it. Obviously, from going from a player to coaching, your salary changes drastically. That's the first thing I think of a lot of players have to realize is unless you played at the NHL level and, you have that, great financial backing. But usually it's a step back monetarily, and you have to be willing to, grind through that. Maybe 4 or 5 years where, you're a little bit of doing 2 or 3 jobs to keep your coaching career alive. And that's what it takes. And if you're willing to do that, and if you really have that passion, you'll find a way, and you will be willing to do it. It won't be a real hardship per se.
Are there certain countries that you would recommend starting out because there's more opportunities or because it's easier to access? Are there certain places where you say, okay, this is definitely an easier point of entry than this country?
Well, you know what? It's different. Every country has a little different niche depending on how popular the hockey is. Obviously, when I was in Sweden, they have quite a few levels that go down quite low. So for a young, inexperienced coach, you may get in at one of those very low levels where the budget is very small, but they're willing to give you that opportunity because you fit within the budget, you fit within their means. So those countries, even Finland, to some extent, even in France, in the lower leagues to some extent, and some of the newer, so those countries are good for that, but also developing countries for hockey, where they're looking for someone who will not only coach their men's pro team, but can help run the youth organization. And get in and do the youth hockey part of it and coach the younger kids, or help coach the coach that coach the younger kids. So, sometimes in more developing countries, maybe in England and those places where they're really looking to build their youth programs as well, those are good opportunities for young coaches as well.
Yeah, because you can really leave a mark in building up the infrastructure, right? And bringing yourself in 100% by helping out where it's needed. That's a really good
Exactly.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, even to the extent, even in Denmark is still looking for that.
yeah.
Their pro game is well developed, and I think that, but they're still looking to keep on developing their youth organizations.
Definitely. I mean, you're always competing against other sports that have more tradition in certain countries, right? So
Yes.
it's always a struggle of who's going to be the next trend sport, and it depends on how the national teams are doing.
Yeah, that's true.
Exactly. So you've coached in France for the last 2 years, I think.
Yes.
And I was wondering about your experience and maybe challenge or difficulties in terms of the language setup. So do you typically coach in English, or have you learned French, or how does that work in terms of getting your personality as a coach across and really connecting with each player when there is a language barrier?
Really now with hockey being so international and Europe opening up to more import hockey players, really everywhere hockey's coached in English now.
Mm.
When I was in the Netherlands, when I was in Sweden, and obviously in France, coaches, basically everything's in English because you have players from, a lot of different countries, not only if you're in France, but, in France, you're allowed 10 imports. So you have North American guys, you may have some Eastern European players. So everything basically is done in English. I would have liked to learn the French language a little better. It's tough. It's, in that short period of time. I think it's important to at least try, because it's good to, talk to the players in their native language in case there is, the translation that always doesn't go across. But most hockey players now, understand English fairly well. And that's really the easiest language to cover everywhere. I had a French-speaking assistant coach, which made a big difference and helped out a lot as well. And usually there's a couple players that are very good that can translate and help you out. But the language barrier isn't as big as a hurdle anymore as it was probably 10 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. And that also speaks to the internationalization of the game, right? Because there's more mobility and there's more people moving around to play at the best leagues for the best teams. So they're becoming more and more international. Has that created a different coaching style if you're bringing in people from very different places? Because we always say, the sport is the sport, but there are different playing styles. There are different ways of, educating players when they're younger, and the focuses are different. So when you're bringing them together pre-season, how do you deal with that?
Well, as a coach, you have your style of how you want to play as a team. And so usually, I have a big say in the players that we're bringing in from out of the country, North American players. So I know the kind of style of player I'm looking for and how we want to play that style. And then whatever country you're in, obviously they're doing the role of getting those players together that play your kind of style as well. And you just have to mix the both because, North American to European style, there is a difference. The rink is a bigger ice surface than it is in North America, so that dictates a different style. But for me, I kind of mold the both of them together. The European style and the North American style. I think both work well. Yeah. And so you kind of mold those players into what you want to do as a coach. Your coaching style of how you want to play your X's and O's morphins a little bit because sometimes you don't always have the players or, it doesn't always work. You can't put the, square peg in a round hole, as they say. Exactly. So you have to change a little bit and be malleable and make different adjustments to your style of play. And then you also have to look at your personalities. So it's an ongoing process, but really you go in with a good general idea of this is how we're going to play, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we like to play. And when you go through the interview process, the board or the general manager is going, okay, that's the style I want this team to play.
Yeah.
So we build from there. So that kind of makes it easier because the pieces are kind of in place of how we want to play. It's just getting the point across. And then it's just, like you said, in preseason, it's really just repeating what you want, getting your ideas across, and it's repetitive, and you just build on that. And players learn fairly quick of, for me, I keep it at 6 or 7 points that are key of how I want you to play, no matter what system we use. But expectations, I guess, is the best thing.
Right.
How we really have to get in place early in a training camp.
And then repetition helps the automation, right, of getting it in and not thinking about it anymore. Definitely.
Exactly. It is. It's repeat, and then repeat it again. Repetition is the best teacher on that, especially early in the season.
Definitely. I mean, you talk to the fact that you have a say in who you choose depending on the style. How much influence do other characteristics of a player have? I mean, there's obviously certain points you talk to them about. Maybe you consult other coaches that they've worked with, or they have a certain reputation. Do you see certain attributes that make players more successful in an international setup? Let's say you have North Americans coming to France or to Sweden. Have you seen a pattern of what makes them successful and what makes them stick? Because a lot of them go abroad for one season, they notice it's not their thing, and then they either quit or they find a job in a minor league, back home. What is the differentiator?
For me, first of all, obviously you've got to decide if he's talented enough at playing.
Right.
And if he's the type of person you want. For me, I really dig into personalities too after that. If they're a good person, their work ethic, those types of things. And then going back on other coaches, I look at it and say, maturity level. Does the player want to come over? Is he willing to, go through those things to be in a different country, learn a different language, learn, different culture. Yeah. And you can tell a little bit by a player's background where he's played, if he's been away from home, if he was an American playing in the Canadian Junior League or vice versa, and he's left home at an early age and he seems self-sufficient, how he was in university. A lot of times if they lived on their own and, were independent, part of that is, and not always, but you look at the university guys, if they've got their degree and they finish school, a lot of times you think, well, that's a pretty hard thing to do. And if they've done that and completed that, they're fairly mature. They're probably mature enough to, deal with all the things that going to Europe, to a different country, to a different culture has to offer. So, that's a big part of what I look at. And the other part is you look at what their background and their family situation is a little bit. Are they leaving a girlfriend or a wife back home? Is that going to be good, or how is that going to work? What their plan is for, to move from there. So it's a combination of everything. And a lot of times you can get a good feel by talking to a player on the phone. And, if you don't always get to, or even on Skype, and, go over those things, and you can tell a little bit how they're going to fit in and how it's going to work. But, probably I would say, for me, 5 to 10% of the time, you get a player there, and by Christmas you say, it's not going to work. He's a good player. I know he isn't going to come back next year. Probably won't bring him back because it's just not his thing. Yeah. It just doesn't work for him.
Yeah. But it's a very good point in terms of the interview process when you're asking them these questions, to look at their reactions, because you really realize if they've actually thought about this, right?
Yeah.
If this is like completely new to them and they're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm going to be homesick. There's Skype, of course, no problem. So that's a really good point, definitely.
Well, part of it is you have to say to the player, and it's really a bit of an adventure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you willing? It's not the same as playing in North America.
Yeah.
It's the same for Europeans coming over.
Mm-hmm.
Culturally, different things are going to be different. You know, food, you know what I mean? The daily life,
Yeah.
what's accepted or not accepted. It's not drastic, but, you know, whether you like it or not, it's their culture. You have to adapt to them.
Exactly.
But
that country is not going to change for one person.
Right. And some things you're going to like and some things you're not. And what you have to look at is, are you willing to be adventurous and, you know, have an adventure and try new things and, you know, be willing to say, okay, well, that's the way it is. I'll deal with it and we'll move on.
Yeah.
And so when you talk to players on that point about the hockey being different, when you can talk to them about, okay, this is how we practice, this is expectations, you know, here's what they expect after the game with the fans and those things. And players, you know, you can generally tell by their reaction how they'll fit in. Okay.
Good to know. So do you have any advice for players that are looking to go abroad now that they know that you're going to ask these questions and they can mentally prepare more? But do you have advice for them for their first season of what should, you know, is there any way for them to integrate better or to just stand out from the others? I mean, you mentioned the whole adventure thing, and I think that's a big point. It's the mindset, right? Are you looking at this as an opportunity, or are you going to be complaining and comparing everything to home, which, you know, you're only going to lose because everything will be different. And I always say it's 80% environment, right? The sport only makes 20% of a difference because it's really, a lot of it is the same. You'll practice, you'll have games, there'll be a coach, physiotherapist, you know, it's the same drills. But the environment is going to be completely different. So what can players do to sort of prepare themselves better for this?
I think the biggest part to start before you ever leave the country is just dig into it on the internet and find out about what people, you know, customs, habits, you know, what's the difference between the two countries, you know, monetary wise, you know, cost of living, those little things, what you can get there, what you can't get there. Maybe talk to a player that's been there, you know, to say, hey, you know what, you love ranch dressing, you can't get it here. Bring some with you. You know, those little things.
Stuff your bags.
If you can bring the little creature comforts like that can maybe help you over of something that's really important to you, you know, just understand that a little bit. But I think the big thing is go over with an open mind. First and foremost, I think things are going to be different, accept them and go along with it and enjoy that process. I think the big thing is after you're there a little bit of time, it's to get away if you can from your, not totally, but get outside and maybe meet some people away from the hockey players, because then you experience a whole different thing. I think it's really important to get out in the city and enjoy it and explore. You know what I mean? Whether the language barrier is hard or easy, it is an adventure. But to get out and explore it and see what's around in your city and maybe meet some people that are away from your sport, because then you get a different perspective. And a lot of times it can be really helpful to you as things go on. I found that there, you know, it can be real helpful to, you know, find the little coffee shop you like, or find something that you're looking for, or they have a different connection. So I think that's the biggest thing is enjoy it, but really get out and see the country, understand the people. When you do that, it makes everything so much easier. It makes the things that maybe you don't like very much that much easier to tolerate. But it's also, when you're doing that, I feel the people that are the people that live in the country, the natives of the country, accept you more and are willing to change a little bit, maybe to help you out too as well.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, to say, okay, well, you know, we do this all the time. And finally, once you get someone, you can say, well, I don't really like to do it that way. Okay, well, we can work a little bit. And it makes situations much easier. So that's probably the best advice I can give for a player in that situation, for sure.
I think that's very wise advice. And I can tell that you have the experience, because it's something that, is a lot of learning by doing. And obviously, giving that sort of advice, I think if players are listening, and you should be listening
yes.
to what Barry has to say, because it will set you up for a much more successful season, but also it will make you realize how fortunate you are actually to be in such a position, to be paid to play or coach the sport you love in a country that's different from your own. So you get to experience a new culture. That is amazing. So, putting that in perspective by really reaching out to the community and getting involved is such a good advice, because it really makes you appreciate it much more than sitting there playing video games or, talking to friends back home the whole day. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there has to be a balance, right? And so Barry, go ahead.
I think you really just have to throw yourself into the culture.
Totally.
And think of it as a great life experience. And a lot of players do a good job at that.
Yeah. So if you had to choose one season or one place that sort of has a special place in your heart, can you do that? I know it's a really, really hard question. The more you travel, the more you see, the harder it gets.
Yeah. I think the first year I went over and coached, I went to a city, Tilburg in the Netherlands.
Yeah. And
you know what? The people were really great. It was just a real easy transition.
Mm-hmm.
If I picked all the places I coached and where I was at, I loved and had a great, experience. But like you said, to pick one, that would probably be it. One, you were very close to a lot of different countries, easy for travel. I just had a good connection there with the management and the players. And I really enjoyed the city. And it was probably because it was such an easy transition, But I think they were willing. They showed me so many things. They were so, people were like beating on my door to go out. So I was going and doing
nice.
Almost really forced. So the people made it a great adventure, but they were very accommodating to make it fun and enjoyable. So that would probably be my best experience.
Awesome. That sounds good. And so where can people meet or connect with you, contact you if they have questions? Obviously, if clubs are interested to work with Barry, he's available right
now. You know what? The best, I'm on LinkedIn. It's very good for me. And through my email and, everything's on there. I answer all my LinkedIn messages. I check every day. So I would think because you can email and do everything through there, that's probably the best place to contact me all the time. So,
perfect.
I can also, my email is a simple one, is smudgehockey@gmail.com, that people can also get a hold of me at too, if they're not on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And I'll link all of this up. So your LinkedIn profile and your email address and any other information you have. If people go to fitacrosscultures.com/episode 47, we'll have the interview there, a couple of more information about you, and then obviously the link to your profile. So they'll find you for sure.
Well, great.
This has been really, really interesting. I would love to, talk more about the different countries, because I'm sure there's been some interesting differences in, your experiences. But we're kind of at the end of the podcast already. So, do you have any final words? We've talked a lot about players, so why don't we give sort of the final advice to coaches that are abroad? Just very briefly, one or two things. If you feel that, the coaches are struggling, they feel that, okay, so I'm in, really trying to build my reputation, need to make this work, I want to go abroad. What would be your advice for them as a final statement?
Probably the biggest thing is, again, be willing to accept different things. I think the big thing is you have to really connect with a board and a bigger group of people. So you've got to be willing to maybe take not, I don't want to say change your standards,
Mm-hmm.
but open up your horizons a little bit more to accept things and say, well, if I really want to do it, this is what I'm going to have to do, and accept it and say, okay, I've made the decision and I'm going to run with it. And to, it's hard. You have to kind of get your foot in the door again.
Mm.
But I think if you want to do it, it's a great experience. It is a very good experience that way. And once you're there, then you can build it from there. So really, if you're willing to say, okay, once I'm there, then I can build once I get there.
Yeah.
But again, it's going to be open-mindedness and probably doing more work than you're normally used to, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're living proof that it works. So thanks so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed this episode, and we hope that, people share it with whoever they think it's interesting and necessary to hear these things. Thanks, Barry.
You're welcome, Susan. It was a pleasure.